Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about the brand new release from the Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery. It is Filey Bay Yorkshire Day 2021 edition. Every year, Yorkshire Day, 1st of August, God's own country, centre of the universe, and to celebrate this, Spirit of Yorkshire release a annual bottling, limited edition, 1,500 bottles of this, not quite cask strength, it's 55% ABV, but this, at the time of recording, it's the launch day today, so before I tell you what the whiskey itself tastes like, let me give you a bit of background information on the distillery itself. The Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery was founded in 2016 by Tom Mellor and David Thompson. Tom was an arable farmer who set up the Wold Top Brewery in 2013 and already had ideas about opening a whisky distillery in conjunction, and so partnered with long-standing friend and marketing expert David to set up the new Spirit venture. The barley used for both beer and whisky production is grown on Tom's own fields, with milling, mashing and fermentation taking place at the brewery 4.5 miles away from the distillery itself. If the distillery was in Scotland, this would not be allowed due to Scotch Whisky Association regulations. In planning the distillery, Tom and David enlisted the help of legendary distillery consultant Jim Swan, who was well known around the world for assisting new distilleries such as Kavalan, Kilchoman, Penderyn and Lindores Abbey before his untimely death in 2017. The house style will ultimately be akin to the likes of Glenlivet, fruit forward but somewhat delicate in body. The master distiller is a young man named Joe Clark. Joe's first job in the whisky industry was as a part-timer in the York branch of the whisky shop, at that time managed by none other than yours truly. His passion and enthusiasm was obvious from the very start, and he has worked tirelessly to ensure the early spirit releases from the distillery, under the brand name of Filey Bay, are of the highest quality. However, as is a legal requirement whenever I discuss Joe, I am obliged to show you this picture of Joe with our good friend Ollie Chilton of the Whisky Exchange during a trip to Islay. Feel free to ask him about the long hair, it's quite the story. In addition to 2 copper pot stills, a directional arm can connect to a 4-plate column still, which enables them to play around with reflux and redistillation. Maturation takes place principally in first fill ex-bourbon casks from Old Forester, although plenty of experimentation has been done with other cask types and finishing. Indeed, the current core range features a finish using Muscatel wine casks and an STR ex-Rioja cask finish. STR, or shaved, toasted and recharred, is a signature of Jim Swan's legacy. Filey Bay flagship, however, can be seen as the key introduction to the Filey Bay flavour profile, with light, fruity and creamy notes throughout. Unlike other recent new whisky distilleries across the UK, Spirit of Yorkshire never had any intention to delve into the massive gin or growing rum market, which would have given them an early and potentially lucrative revenue stream. The only concession they've made was the release of a whisky and malt spirit cream liqueur at the end of 2020, allowing visitors to their distillery who didn't drink whisky the chance to still appreciate their output. Yorkshire Day takes place on 1st of August, celebrating the largest county in the United Kingdom and a region often named by its inhabitants as God's own country, given its home to, amongst other things, the Yorkshire Dales, the oldest football club in the world, Yorkshire Puddings, and of course Sean Bean. First launched in 2020, the Yorkshire Day bottlings from Spirit of Yorkshire are an annual limited quantity release at a higher ABV than their standard bottlings, with more experimentation with cask makeup. The 2021 edition features some of the oldest whiskies in the distillery portfolio, in a combination of ex-Oloroso and ex-bourbon casks at an ABV of 55%, with only 1,500 bottles being produced. Right then, so what does the whiskey itself taste like? I am very lucky to have a bit of a sample bottle to share with my customers and also film this video. And this is, so whereas the 2020 was, I hate 2020 was bourbon maturation and then a Pedro Jimenez sherry finish. This is bourbon maturation along with Oloroso sherry finish. Now I actually have, I'm sold out completely. They have all gone of the 2020. Oh, I've done it again, 2020. But I still have some sample stock available of last year's edition. So what I'm actually going to do is then do a comparison. I'm going to give you some tasting notes for the 2021 first, but then I'll pour a little bit out of the 2020 and give you a little bit of a comparison between the two. So on the nose, really rich and full and real kind of like a deep, dark, fruit-filled fruitcake. It's one of those like Christmas cakes that, when I was a kid, my mum did this once. We did a homemade Christmas cake and we got loads of sultanas and raisins in a pan, and then just dumped a load of like sherry and brandy and whiskey on top of it. And it was one of those where I think I would have been about 8 or 9 years old. I was getting pretty drunk just on the fumes. And it really does evoke that memory of being stood in the kitchen going, "Ooh, blimey, this is quite nice. I like this feeling." And here's where I am today. Because it's got that really rich, sweet fruit, but that lovely kind of boozy, sweet fruit feel to it as well. There's so much fruitiness going on here. It's absolutely wonderful. It's really rich and dense. It's kind of super concentrated. Raisins, sultanas, dark fruits in there. There's a touch of sort of cinnamon and nutmeg spice as well. It's got a real Christmassy vibe on it. Now this is, end of July for Yorkshire Day on the 1st of August, but honestly, you could have put this as like this is a Christmas edition and it would have been absolutely bang on. But the intensity on the nose, it's bottled at 55% as well, but I'm taking a good sniff of this, and it's not feeling like it's that strong. It's not doing anything to the back of my nose. I don't feel like I'm burning my nose hairs, of which I have a lot. It's brilliantly balanced, but it really doesn't feel, it doesn't nose particularly intense in terms of like the alcohol level. It's fruit and spice and richness. That sherry element really does come through, but it's interesting. I almost would have sort of said it's something like a PX sherry. You've got that real intensity of sweetness there as well. What a nose, it's absolutely phenomenal. God, I love that. Right. And what's on the nose absolutely carries on through to the palate. There's an incredible mouthfeel to it. It feels almost syrupy. It's a really thick, dense mouthfeel. And that intense fruit cake, really, really dark, like really dark fruit cake, and those raisins and sultanas and everything like that is really kind of tightly packed together in a dense cake. The best type of fruit cake. This whiskey just needs like a layer of marzipan and icing on the top of it, and it's basically that in liquid form. But I might have to add some amaretto to this later on. It's that intensity of fruit, that sherry feel that comes through. Again, if somebody had said to me, it's a sherry cask, finish, sherry cask maturation all the way through, what cask is it? I would have said PX. I wouldn't have said Oloroso, because of the sweetness that's in there. That dark fruitiness really reminds me of PX sherry whiskies, which personally I absolutely adore. Now what's interesting is the rest of the Filey Bay range, particularly if you've watched the video for the peated cask finish, is their bourbon maturation that they do with the flagship, the peated cask, their core lines, introduces a lovely light creaminess, but there's also a citrusy element to it as well. It's very much a kind of like a light, summery, spring-like whiskey. The flagship really is quite light, delicate, but still with bags of flavour in. This goes completely in another direction and is an absolute sherry bomb. There isn't so much of the citrusiness, and maybe that kind of that citrus note, the citrus cream note that you do get from the flagship. I'm kind of having to search for it, but it might be that kind of like, when you do get a dark fruit cake or you're making Christmas cake, for example, you normally do also put like dried peel in it. And candied peel, lemon peel, that sort of thing, just to sort of lighten it up a bit. I am looking for it, admittedly. It's not obvious, but as I'm trying to find it, there is a slight sort of lemon zest, as though it's that kind of, again, this cakey element. I keep going back to this fruit cake because that is, for me, the overriding kind of image that it's giving me in my head as I'm tasting it, is that lemon zest. It's kind of like really fine, those lemon zesters you get that do like really fine bits of lemon peel is included in the cake, and it's just giving you a tiny, tiny, very, very subtle little burst of kind of lemon peel in there as well. But it's that richness. It's that, and I think that kind of creamy mouthfeel that they get from the bourbon cask, but also depending on where Joe's taking the cut, I think it's a little bit later on, because you're getting a much more of a heavier weight to the mouthfeel. Works brilliantly with that intense fruitiness. If you like heavily sherried whiskies, you are going to love this. And we're talking sherry bombs, like, I don't know, actually this has got elements of Abala Abuna, which is again one of my all-time favorites. Absolutely stunning whiskey. Unfortunately, just too expensive nowadays from what it used to be. But brilliant. Glendronachs, we're talking those really, really heavily sherried whiskies. If you like heavily sherried Scotch, this is absolutely up your street. Now, this is some of the oldest stock that is in amongst this. So we're looking at, what is it, 5 years now? 5-year-old? I don't think they've hit 6-year-old. Belies all of that youthfulness. It really does not taste like a young whiskey, and that is really because of those intense fruity flavours. You could put this against the likes of a Glendronach 12-year-old and really kind of go, well, it's about the same age. I don't know what the age is. This is not saying it's a 5-year-old whiskey at all. Now, I'm not putting any water in this because I don't think it needs it. I really don't think it does need it. I'm drinking this neat, maybe a drop, maybe, but to be honest, drinking it now, there's very little kick. It's not obvious it's 55% at all. I probably would have gone 48 maybe, because of that rich fruitiness, because of that thick mouthfeel that's there. It's overpowering and it's overcoming what would be the burn from such a high ABV. Now, obviously I've finished this. It's stunning. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, you know, Joe is doing fantastic work at this distillery. He's picking out some absolute belters. This is really one, it's a very different beast to the standard Filey base. What I will say, if you're a big fan of the flagship, if you're a fan of the peated Castor Muscatel, that sort of thing, this is going in a different direction. This is really kind of like very, very full-on, rich fruit sherry intensity. And it depends on how you go with sherry whiskies. But if you like sherry bombs, you're going to absolutely love this. Now, let's do a quick comparison with the 2020 version. So this was last year's, and this was a Pedro Jimenez sherry finish. Now, as I was saying earlier, the 2021, if somebody had said what sherry cask is, I probably would have said PX, because it's so sweet. It's the sweet intensity of it. It's not liqueur-y, but it really does have a very rich, full fruitiness, which PX whiskey does. So let's look at the 2020. So on the nose, not as much as there is on the 2021. It's lighter. There's not as much of that fruitiness. There's nowhere near as much as the raisin, sultana, that sort of element. It comes across a little bit lacking almost because of the intensity of this year's version. There's a bit more citrusiness coming through, but there's certainly not the deep, dark, rich aromas that are coming through for this year's. Okay, let's give it a try. It's spicier. It has more of a sort of a dry spice element to it. The fruitiness is there. Again, there's a raisin, what I would expect from a PX finished whiskey, but it's not as intense. It's almost like this year's version is fruitcake dialed to 11. This is fruitcake dialed to about 7. It doesn't have that weight that this year's has got. It's still good, don't get me wrong. It's still eminently drinkable, and again, compared to the core range, it's much more of a sherry influence. It's much more of a dark fruit element than it is with the citrusy cream element that there is on the flagships. But it's just, it doesn't have the depth that this year's has got. It feels like it's lacking something. And side by side, this year's is phenomenal. Last year's is very, very good and stood out when it came out as a very good whiskey indeed. But I don't know whether it's just that little extra year of aging, that using that slightly older spirit on this year's version. It's almost like it's that extra year has just taken it over a point where all of a sudden everything's opened out and you get a lot more intensity, a lot more fruitiness. It's just that the 2020 is there and the 2021 is there, definitely. And it does make me wonder what next year's version is going to be like, because if it keeps doing that, it's just going to get better and better and better. So, It does actually come with a tin this year, which is very nice, because last year's didn't, so you do get a tin with it as well. I know that doesn't affect the flavour, but it's a nice thing to have. I know some people are going to chuck it away. It's exactly the same price, so it's $84.99, and I know that some people are going to be going, oh, $84.99, hang on a second, it's only a 5-year-old, that's a bit expensive. Well, this is a limited edition. There are 1,500 bottles of this, and I've opened one of them for a Spirit of Yorkshire tasting that I'm doing with Joe next Thursday. So 5th of August, if you're watching it before then and there is time, and you are also based in the UK, I do have a couple of spaces left. We are looking at the flagship, the Muscatel, the STR finish, the peated finish. We're also going to be trying the Yorkshire Day 2021, and we have a special cask sample, specially selected by Joe. Sneak preview, it's a full-term Fino cask at 64.1%, so it's going to be absolutely amazing. We're going to do all 6 of those, and Joe is going to join us on the call. So I'll probably be taking the mick out of him because he used to be working for me, but he's going to give you some background information in terms of the distillery, the production process, the whole thing. It's going to be absolutely amazing. I've still got some spaces left. It's £30 a ticket. You get 6 30ml samples. So if you are watching this and there is still time to get in touch and for me to post it to you, I do have some spaces left. So do get in touch, but you're going to have to be quick. If you're watching after, I don't know, the 2nd or 3rd of August, it's probably too late. Anyway, it's limited edition, and it's not cask strength, but it's 55%. The rest of the range is around the 50-55 pound mark for the rest of their core range. And again, people have said, oh, well, it's a brand new distillery, how can they be charging that much when, you know, I can get a 10-year-old Scotch for 35 quid? Well, yes, you can get a 10-year-old Scotch for 35 quid. That's been going for nearly 100 years and has got all that backup of all that stock that they can afford to sell a 10-year-old at 35 quid. Spirit of Yorkshire never did a gin, only just did a liqueur literally at the end of last year. So they've had no revenue up to the point where they were releasing their first whiskies. They've literally had to wait for 3 years with barely anything coming in. The coffee shop and a couple of their distillery projects, and that was it. They don't have the stocks to build up yet to be able to then bring the prices back down to say, here's a 10-year-old at 40 quid, 45 quid. Torrevec, 50 quid. Ardnamurchan, 50 quid. Lindores Abbey, 45. You know, new Scotch distilleries are coming out at roughly that same price point, and they also don't have a gin or anything else to bring some revenue streams in. This is where the market is. So if you're balking at the fact that, oh, well, it's a whiskey from Yorkshire, it should be 20 quid. Why? Do you not want them to continue to run their business and make any money and continue to operate? Because if you want a Yorkshire whiskey at 30 quid, they can't operate at that level because they've got no other income coming in. This is the fruits of their labour, and this is them getting their money back from the outlay of setting up the distillery in the first place. So actually, 1,500 bottles, limited edition, when it's that good, do you know what? 85 quid, not a problem at all. Don't see an issue with that at all. If it was too expensive, I wouldn't have it on the shelf. As much as I love Joe and as much as I love the distillery, if I didn't think it was a good price, then I wouldn't have it on the shelf. And I do think it's a fair price because it's a bloody good whiskey. It's really, really good. If you like heavily sherried, intense, full-on, rich, fruity, unctuous, what a good word that is to describe that whiskey, unctuous, rich, decadent whiskey, no matter where it's from, be it Scotch, Yorkshire, the rest of the world, whatever. If you like that sort of whiskey, you are going to absolutely love this. And I really, really recommend you pick up a bottle of it. 2, in fact, because there potentially is going to be some collectability on this as well, because some of the prices that Spirit of Yorkshire stuff is going. So if you are that way inclined, which I'm not that keen on, to be honest, but if you are that way inclined, then yeah, get 2 bottles, open one, keep the other. You might make your money back. I don't know, whatever, do what you want to do. Anyway, brilliant stuff. Joe nailed it again. Again, he's done it. It's annoying because I remember what it was like when he started working for me, and he was an annoying little so-and-so, but he's doing an amazing job. So yeah, great stuff. Highly recommend it. That's me done. I shall see you in the next video. Cheers. Of course, it would probably help if I told you how to get a bottle, and I forgot to say it in my excitement. So, www.spiritspecialist.com. You can also come in the store, try a bit, because I still do have a bit left of the sample stock, and you can also compare it to last year's version if you wish as well. So, yes, you can purchase it from me through the website or come into the shop,
say hello and pick up a bottle in person. See you soon.